What happens when the agency we trust for law enforcement, well, ends up tangled in its own political investigation?
Yeah, and the core question becomes, were its leaders actually lying to Congress?
That really is the heart of our deep dive today, isn't it?
It is. We're sorting through quite a stack of sources here, and they paint these sharply divided, frankly, pretty alarming pictures about the FBI's integrity, its actions.
We're talking about claims of serious political bias,
Yeah.
weaponization of the agency.
Exactly, and just a fundamental breakdown of trust, according to these reports.
Okay, let's try to unpack all of this. Our mission here is to guide you, our listener, through these recent revelations.
And it really all kicked off, or at least intensified, because of one specific kind of shocking fact that just surfaced.
Right, let's jump into that. That's our 90-second news hook. We now have confirmation, and this is straight from an internal FBI after-action report, that 274 plainclothes FBI agents were deployed around the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021.
And that number, 274, it's explosive. Why? Because it just flatly contradicts what former FBI leadership initially told Congress.
So this discrepancy, it's led President Trump and the current Director of Special Activities, Kash Patel, to come right out and accuse.
Yeah, accuse former heads of the agency of hiding things, of lying to oversight committees. Pretty serious charges.
And the sources we've looked at suggest this lack of transparency. It isn't just, a political fumble. It's apparently caused real anger inside the Bureau.
That's a key point. Agents themselves in these internal documents described feeling like, and this is a quote, pawns in a political war.
Wow. Pawns in a political war.
Yeah. And that points to, well, a massive potential failure of institutional integrity. It really demands accountability right from the top.
Absolutely. If your own agents feel used like that, you've got a deep structural issue.
That's the crux of it. So let's zero in on that deployment first. The number itself, 274, confirmed internally.
Okay. But what were they doing there? That many agents?
Well, Director Patel, the current director, he clarified they were sent in for crowd control. But, and this is important, only after the riot was officially declared.
Okay, so what's the big deal about that timing? Why is sending FBI agents for crowd control seen as a problem or against standards?
Well, fundamentally, the FBI isn't your local police department. It's a federal agency focused on major crimes, intelligence, not usually street-level crowd management.
Right.
So Patel's argument is that this deployment, it broke with FBI standards. He blames corrupt leadership. The idea is that putting the Bureau into that kind of politically charged situation blurred lines it shouldn't cross.
And this is where things get really heated, politically speaking. President Trump weighed in on this 274 number.
He did. He suggested these agents were, quote, secretly placed against all rules and maybe even acted as agitators and insurrectionists.
Okay, that's a very serious accusation.
It is. And we have to be clear, the sources present this as President Trump's claim. It's fueled a lot of suspicion, certainly. But there isn't direct proof presented in these documents that they were inciting violence.
Got it. So an accusation, but not confirmed evidence of acting as agitators?
Correct. What is confirmed in other reports, though, and this is maybe even more fascinating, involves confidential human sources, CHSs.
Ah, the informants. What did the sources say there?
Well, a Department of Justice Inspector General report found the FBI had 26 registered CHSs operating in the D.C. area for events related to January 6th.
26.
And here's the kicker. The sources confirm that 4 of those CHSs actually went inside the Capitol building during the riot.
4 FBI informants went inside the Capitol.
Yes. And crucially, according to these reports, none of those 4 who entered faced prosecution from the Biden-Harris Justice Department.
Okay, wait. So ordinary people who went inside are facing charges, some quite serious, but FBI informants who did the same thing were not prosecuted.
That's what the sources state. And that obviously raises huge questions about selective enforcement, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It really implies, or seems to suggest, a double standard right from the get-go, depending on who you worked for.
Exactly. And think about how that looks internally. If leadership is maybe hiding the number of agents, and then you have informants entering the Capitol without consequences, how does that sit with the rank-and-file agents who are just trying to do their jobs?
It leads right back to that feeling of being used, like those agents said. The internal after-action report, it documented personnel describing the whole deployment as chaotic, politically compromised.
And that phrase again, pawns in a political war.
Yeah.
They felt used. and they documented it.
And their criticism didn't stop with just the chaos of January 6th itself, did it?
No, not at all. Agents openly called out what they saw as, well, hypocrisy and political bias from the leadership.
How so? What examples did they give?
They specifically pointed to the very aggressive prosecution of the January 6th defendants, sometimes using SWAT teams for what ended up being misdemeanor charges.
Right.
And they contrasted that sharply with how the Bureau responded when they, quote, watched cities burn across America during the summer of 2020.
So they saw a disparity in the response based on the political context?
That was their conclusion, yes. The agents stated in these internal documents that the difference in response reeks of political bias. They felt the leadership's ideology was driving enforcement decisions.
That is a pretty stark assessment coming from within the Bureau itself.
It is. And this internal conflict, it's perfectly illustrated by the case of former FBI agent Marcus Allen.
Ah, the whistleblower. What happened with him?
He faced retaliation, suspension, loss of his security clearance, basically for sharing information internally that, quote, questioned the official narrative about January 6th.
Just for questioning it?
Apparently so. But the sources confirmed he was ultimately vindicated.
How so?
His security clearance was fully reinstated, and he received 27 months of back pay and benefits. Full restoration.
Wow. And House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, he called that a total vindication for a great patriot.
That phrase, total vindication, it's significant. It suggests the attempt to silence him didn't hold up, that his questions were legitimate, even if leadership didn't like them.
So even with alleged bias at the top, maybe some internal checks or external pressure worked in that case.
It seems so. Now, if agents felt like pawns on Jan 6th, the sources suggest this wasn't isolated. There are broader concerns about institutional overreach impacting civil liberties.
Okay, so let's broaden out. You mentioned federal collusion and censorship.
Right, moving from the Capitol grounds to, say, Silicon Valley. Oversight investigations have been digging into whether the FBI, particularly under the previous leadership, leaned on big tech companies.
Coerced and colluded is the phrase used in some reports.
Yes, coerced them to censor speech, which obviously raises major First Amendment red flags.
And the prime example always cited here is the Hunter Biden laptop story, right before the 2020 election.
Exactly. The allegation is the FBI actively suppressed that story. They reportedly told social media companies, falsely, that it was likely Russian disinformation.
Falsely? How do we know it was false?
Well, this is the really concerning part. According to transcribed interviews cited in the sources, the FBI personnel giving those warnings to big tech, they apparently knew the laptop was real at the time.
They knew it was real.
They had it. They had possessed the laptop for months and had verified its contents. But by not correcting the disinformation narrative, they essentially allowed legitimate reporting to be censored right before a presidential election.
That seems problematic, to say the least. And is this seen as part of a pattern?
Critics argue yes. Look at the FBI's Richmond field office memo that surfaced.
Ah, the one about Catholics.
Yes, it linked racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists with, quote, radical traditionalist Catholic ideology.
Just linking those groups seems like a stretch.
Well, critics argue it dangerously lowered the threshold for surveillance based on religious or political views, not actual criminal threats.
And didn't the memo suggest inserting agents into churches?
It did. It suggested using at least one undercover employee to be, quote, inserted into places of worship to develop sources. The idea of government informants inside churches, based on ideology, that sent chills down many spines.
Understandably, it feels like a massive overstep.
And then we circle back to that core complaint from the agents. Uneven justice.
Okay.
The sources level criticism at the DOJ and FBI for applying a double standard when enforcing the FACE Act.
Remind us, the FACE Act is?
The Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It protects access to reproductive health facilities.
Got it. So the claim is?
The claim, outlined in these oversight reports, is that the Biden-Harris DOJ protected anti-life activists while using aggressive law enforcement tactics, primarily against pro-life advocates.
And the example often used is Mark Hoax.
Exactly. The pro-life advocate whose home was raided at dawn by an FBI SWAT team over alleged FACE Act violations.
And what happened in his case?
He went to trial, and a jury unanimously acquitted him of all charges.
Acquitted. So critics point to that raid, the SWAT team. The charges later dropped as evidence of politically motivated enforcement.
That's precisely the argument, that the tactics used were disproportionate and showed bias.
Which brings us, I think, to the accountability piece. What's being done, or what's the plan?
Well, a lot centers on the current director, Kash Patel. President Trump nominated him specifically as an advocate for truth, accountability, and the Constitution.
So his mandate is basically to clean house.
That seems to be the mission. His stated goal is streamlining operations and making sure the FBI operates with enough openness to rebuild trust. He's called the political influence an existential threat to the Bureau's credibility.
And is Congress playing a role here?
Definitely. The House Judiciary Committee, for instance, supports Patel's transparency goals. They're actively pushing for documents on all these issues we've discussed.
From the school board monitoring controversy.
Right, to the Jan 6 issues, including the investigation into those 2 pipe bombs found that day, which critics say has moved incredibly slowly.
So Congress is trying to use its oversight power to force information out.
Essentially, yes. To get the documents and answers that they argue former Director Wray didn't provide, and to restore some real oversight to an agency that, again, even its own agents described as politically infected.
So let's try to synthesize this for you, the listener. What's the big picture here?
Well, what emerges from these sources, from whistleblowers, internal reports, external investigations, is an alleged pattern. A pattern of double standards, political influence affecting operations.
From Capitol security on Jan 6th to online censorship to how certain groups are investigated.
Right. It paints a picture of deep institutional conflict. You have agents calling the FBI weaponized, demanding radical transparency, wanting a return to just impartial law enforcement.
And understanding this internal struggle, this fight for accountability within one of our most powerful agencies, it's really key, isn't it, for protecting constitutional rights?
Absolutely. Which leads us to, I think, a final provocative thought for you to consider. If frontline federal agents themselves are openly saying their agency operates with political bias, if they're documented applying different levels of treatment based on ideology, what does that really tell us about the state of equal justice under law in America today?
That's the unsettling question, isn't it? How do we guarantee the rules apply the same way to everyone, no matter who's in the White House or running the agencies?
The fight for that evidence, for that transparency in the coming months, it might just determine if public trust in the Bureau's core promise, fidelity, bravery, integrity, can ever truly be rebuilt.